Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. My colleague and co-host, Gordon Chang, with the Daily Beast is here. There is trouble in China. Trouble in the economy, trouble in the South China Sea, trouble in the governance of the Communist Party. We begin, however, with what looks like a history lesson tonight. May 4th, 1919. Gordon and I were talking, and Gordon proposed, and my scan came up with Mao Zedong, Versailles Treaty. Explain, Gordon. Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. Well, May 4th, 1919 is an important date. 97 years ago this day, there were demonstrations in Beijing over the Versailles Treaty. The German possessions in China, in Shandong province in the northeast, were given to the Japanese rather than given to the Chinese government. This has shaped not only governance, but Chinese attitudes for those 97 years. And unfortunately, we're starting bearing some of the consequences of what happened then.
Those events, the protests by the students, the rioting, that was a foundation for the Communist Party in China and Mao, as I recall.
Absolutely. And what it did was it paved the way for revolutionary change in China. And of course, that meant the People's Republic.
Revolutionary change and violence. Those themes have, for the last century, dominated political conversation in China, and no less so than right now. We welcome our colleague Arthur Waldron of the University of Pennsylvania. The man's name is Xi. He is the president and commander-in-chief of China, meaning he leads the PLA, because the army is loyal to the party, not to the people of China. And the other man's name is Li. He is the premier, meaning that he's in charge of the economy. These look to be, on a seating chart, the two most important names in the Communist Party. But right now there is talk of a feud. Arthur, a very good evening to you. This feud, what does it look like, and can it run to violence? Good evening.
Well, I think the way to think of it is this. Think of the Chinese Communist Party as being a huge mafia organization having no procedures for resolving disputes. And think of Xi as being sort of head capo, and think of Li as being second capo. Normally, these two would have to work together. But in this case, it appears that they do not get along, and they don't like to talk to each other. They have a rivalry. Furthermore, they come from different backgrounds. Capo number one is from the sort of party nobility. Capo number two is from the party youth movement. Now, this is bad enough just to have two leaders who are pulling in opposite directions. There's a list there has been a list published of things that they just cannot agree on. But about a week ago, it was reported, but not confirmed, that an attempt had been made on Li's life in Sichuan, that two cars had driven wildly across the street and tried to smash into a van in which he was traveling. And the man who was driving the van managed to escape, and the two cars then disappeared. And we don't have any more detail than that. But here's the point. If this was capo number one trying to kill capo number two, which is what it sounds like, then capo number two is in no doubt of his own predicament, which is that he's got to strike back or he's going to be dead. If he doesn't somehow strike back, he loses the game forever. And the fact that they come from two completely different social networks in China greatly complicates this, because it means that the rivalry between the two individuals can generalize very quickly into rivalries among tens of millions of people having affiliations to one or the other of the groups.
Arthur, of course this is serious if it's true. We also know that Xi Jinping and Li Ka-chang, Capo 1 and Capo 2, as you call them, have been in serious disagreement for quite some time. At the National People's Congress meeting in the early March, Li Ka-chang gave his work report, which is a very long speech, interrupted 40 times by applause. Applause, of course, is obligatory. And the cameras caught Xi Jinping not clapping once. An enormous breach of protocol, a clear indication that there are some serious troubles. There is talk that Li Ka-chang and Xi Jinping met the day before, an acrimonious meeting. Obviously, things were not resolved by the time of Li's work report. Clearly, there is something wrong at the top of the Communist Party, and whether this assassination report is true or not, it's an indication that the elite is starting to divide, which means that the party itself can be shaken.
Well, Gordon, I agree with you about that, and I think your point about it being at the top is very important, because the way things in China work right now is they're top down. You belong to somebody who's above you. And the way unity is maintained is by having the very, very top people trust each other, work together, and so forth. And if the top two people split, then the split just goes right down the whole pyramid, because everybody lines up with whichever of the top guys is their guy. Now, in a parliamentary system, you would have a vote. If it were a matter of law, you might go to a court of law. You could have a referendum. There are lots of ways you can do it, but China has never developed any of those mechanisms remotely, nothing remotely resembling those mechanisms. And in the past, assassination has been, if you look at the leaders of the People's Republic of China, most of the people, all of the people who were Mao's comrades, perished or were disappeared one way or the other, and it was only it was only his own death, Zhou Enlai's death, in early 1976 that kept him from being killed by Mao, who died in September 76. So the record of the top two people getting along is very bad. So we have bad precedents here. Now, if this happens and there is violence or there's an attempt to kill Xi or something, the whole world is going to be astonished, because we take for granted a kind of a sort of a Starbucks stability in China. But that's an illusion.
Yeah, this is critical, because in the Maoist era, as you point out, the penalty for losing a political struggle was often death. And Deng Xiaoping's contribution to Chinese communist politics was to reduce the cost of losing, so people would not have the incentive to fight to the end and tear the Communist Party apart. What we have seen during Xi Jinping's tenure, which started November 2012, is that he has increased the cost of losing. Now, many people have been imprisoned, their assets stripped away and humiliated. If he has actually taken this next step and decided to try to kill one of his political adversaries, it means that we are back in the 1950s or the 1960s. Got to remember that May 16th is the 50th anniversary of the start of the Cultural Revolution by Mao Zedong, which was basically a political struggle writ large across the country,
in which more than 1.5 million people died. And just to put the icing on the cake, remember that at this time China seems to be preparing for war with up to 10 neighbors. So it's not as if things are calm outside the empire either. So it may be that there's just too much going on, and that finally the deep underlying pressures are coming, and the fissures are going to start to open, and we should be ready for this rather than totally unprepared as we usually are.
Arthur, I want your thought and then Gordon's thought on this. Gordon has taught me that there was a bargain between the leadership of the Chinese Party and the Communist Party, that in future we will no longer kill our rivals. We'll break them, we'll imprison them, we'll drive them out of office, but we won't kill them. Has that bargain been kept, or is that now thrown out the window? Arthur, you first.
Well, I would say that if you're of high enough rank that has applied, but certainly numerous dissenters and people of lower rank, sort of people in regular society, have been killed and are being killed for political reasons or to get their kidneys or for any number of reasons.
But the leadership.
But the leadership so far has abided by this sort of,
all right,
we'll let you live out your life.
Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, mid-level junior officials have been put in jail and stripped of assets. This is unprecedented, at least during the reform era. And if indeed it goes to the senior leaders and the people in the Politburo Standing Committee, this is really new, really dangerous.
That's correct.
Arthur Waldron, the University of Pennsylvania, Gordon Chang, of the Daily Beast. A feud in China doesn't stay in China. I'm John Batchelor.